شكراً للسيد الرئيس ماكي سال رئيس دولة السنغال ورئيس الاتحاد الأفريقي.
Thank you, President of Senegal, Mr.
والآن
Macky Sall, and
رحبوا
President
معي
of the African Union.
بالبارونيس
Thank you for your
مينوش
statement.
شفيق رئيسة جامعة لندن
I'd now
للاقتصاد والعلوم
I'd
السياسية.
like to give the floor to Baroness Misha Sheffield, who is the Director of the School of Economics.
I am honored to speak here today in the country of my birth, a country that has been the cradle of human civilization for millennia, on a topic that will determine the future of human civilization and whether it lasts for more millennia. I'm an economist who's worked on development and environment issues for several decades, and I wanted to speak to you today about the economy of the future. But before doing that, let me start with a story from the past. Over 3,000 years ago, a different kind of climate change, not caused by greenhouse gases, but by volcanic eruptions, changed weather patterns in the world, resulting in persistent droughts that caused famines and political unrest in ancient Egypt. The pharaohs of the Ptolemaic dynasty, such as Cleopatra, went to great lengths to adapt, transferring grain from productive regions to drought-plagued areas, opening up grain stores, crossbreeding cattle to develop heat-resistant animals, and providing tax relief. These foresighted efforts by the pharaohs managed to prolong the Egyptian empire for a half a century more. But ultimately, one of the greatest empires that the world has ever seen collapsed because of the effects of climate change. The difference between then and now is that we are the cause of today's climate change, and we have the means to stop it by changing our economy. So what could the economy of the future look like? We have a choice. It could be one based on familiar technologies, markets, and institutions. We could continue with polluted air and water, where our children suffer from respiratory diseases and 8 to 10 million people die each year from air pollution, where our economies are struck by frequent shocks caused by unpredictable weather changes, which cause catastrophic losses, where people have to move across borders as their livelihoods are destroyed by rising sea levels, persistent droughts, and rising temperatures, and one where the natural world continues to diminish. I can also paint a very different picture of the economy of the future, one in which we make the needed investments and create cities in which we can move and live and breathe and thrive, one in which the food we eat regenerates the earth rather than depletes it, where our economies continue to grow, and especially in poor countries, livelihoods and living standards continue to improve, but where this growth is greener, more stable, and where human well-being is enhanced by supporting and protecting nature and the ecosystems on which all life depends. Just as we had an industrial revolution that transformed our economies in the 19th century, and a green revolution which transformed agriculture in the 20th century, we need a green industrial revolution in the 21st centuries that makes our economies more sustainable. That low-carbon economy is one where there are huge opportunities for innovation and new technologies and a more attractive way of life. So how do we get this economy of the future? We know it will take a great deal of investment. Meeting the climate goals of the Paris Agreement requires investment on the scale of about $4 to $6 trillion per year globally. We know we are in difficult economic times with war, recession, and inflation. Where will the money come from for this new investment? In tough times, we need to use our limited resources most efficiently. And given the history of climate change, we need an appropriate balance between responsibility and resources. And as we learned during the COVID pandemic, when we try and tackle global problems from national silos, it is more expensive and less effective. So we need to do this together. Public sector investment will play a key role in many parts, particularly in the advanced economies. Despite current fiscal constraints, these investments can be financed because they will generate positive returns. For developing countries, many of which face high debt burdens and a high cost of capital, we need to enable the multilateral development banks to massively increase concessional finance to make clean investment cheaper than dirty ones. The actions needed are laid out very clearly in the report of the independent high-level expert group on climate finance chaired by Vera Songway and Nick Stern that will be launched this week. Lending by the multilateral development banks needs to increase at least threefold, supported by more capital and more imaginative ways of using their balance sheets, as has been recently suggested in a report to the G20. This lending needs to be supported so that the big emitters are compensated for incurring costs for producing global public goods, and so that adaptation funding is provided on generous terms for vulnerable countries where loss and damage is high. Such an approach would accelerate the green industrial and agricultural revolution using the most efficient financing channels we have for the world as a whole. And of course, the private sector has an important role to play. Governments can de-risk the regulatory environment by providing clear policy frameworks and guarantees. Development banks can provide platforms that crowd in private finance, creating leverage or sharing risks around first losses and frontier projects. And all sources of financing need to play their part at this moment to stretch beyond their comfort zones if we're going to make progress at the scale and speed that we need. I applaud the Egyptian government's focus on adaptation and Africa at this COP. Africa is responsible for only 1% of the stock of global emissions, but will be hardest hit by climate change. That cannot be right. At the same time, many African countries are rich in sunshine, wind, rivers, and forests. With support at a lower cost of capital, they could leapfrog the dirty energy systems of the past. And if we create a better carbon market, that could provide a huge source of income for countries rich in carbon sinks. The green industrial revolution could be the new growth story for Africa. So, the economy of the future is our choice. We face a classic intertemporal investment problem. Incur some investment costs now with high returns later, or opt for inaction or not enough action, but incur very high costs and risks later. Even if you don't take into account future generations, which make these arguments much, much stronger, it seems to me that the choice is clear. Climate change and biodiversity loss are here, and we are already suffering the consequences, as the film we just saw showed so clearly. Unlike the pharaohs, we can overcome this climate change by choosing a different economy for the future. Thank you very much.
شكراً للبارونيس مينوش شفيق رئيسة جامعة لندن للاقتصاد والعلوم السياسية. الشباب هم قوة المستقبل. يحملون طاقات وإبداعات متجددة يحرصون من خلالها على تقديم الأفضل للبشرية. اليوم سنستمع إلى شابة ملهمة آمنت بحلمها، تبنت قضية تهم البشرية واتخذت على أرض الواقع خطوات جادة ضد التغير المناخي. رحبوا معي بليا ناموغيرا، ناشطة المناخ من أوغندا.
And has worked to fight climate change herself. I would like you to welcome Ms. Lia Namogera, a climate activist from Uganda.
I greet you all who are here for a good cause, leaders who are working tirelessly to save our dear planet. I salute you. Individuals like Lia Namgera, who are doing whatever it takes to see that life continues on our dear planet. I salute you. And those who are still denying and have not yet believed that the climate crisis is affecting us, we have stories to share. I and many young people were robbed from our future. We've been forced to grow, to act, to think like adults, because we cannot watch as our future is shut, our dreams put to an end, our home, Mother Earth, burning, heating in drought, and we do nothing. When I was 14 years old, I saw landslides killing so many people due to harsh weather conditions. These images have disturbed me and cannot allow me to rest until something is done about the changing climate. Individually, everyone has a role to play to save our dear planet. At such a tender age, I started a project called Birthday Trees when I was turning 15 years of age. I plant trees on people's birthdays as one of the ways to fight climate change. I have a goal of planting 1 million trees and more. What is your goal? It is the rule of nature living for others. Because plants do not eat their own food, rivers do not drink their own water. I don't believe it is justice to the young generation when our rivers and lakes are polluted. I don't see justice when big polluters are untouchable. Is it justice for the world leaders to choose profits over lives? COP27 has been nicknamed the African COP. If COP27 is to truly deliver, we must face some real truth. Some truth that will face decades of inaction from world leaders. Some truth that the world is in a state of emergency because of fossil fuels. Some truth that Africa contributes less than 4% of the carbon emissions, but we suffer the most. The future is at stake, mostly young children. We're not sure whether we are heard when we speak or we're just ignored. But let the African COP be a different COP. Let the African COP listen to the biggest stakeholders. Let the African COP be an action COP. Politicians, when you stand up to talk, my generation requests that speak like there is an emergency. Speak like you are not barren. Act like you have an access on Earth, because this is the only planet where we're going to carry on your legacy as your children. Men in office, how are you going to be remembered? Do you wish to be remembered as one who did a lot of nothing while in power? Fellow delegates on the conservation front, the world is looking upon us to come up with an ambitious action plan that majorly benefits people. A sustainable plan that predicts a bright future. The time to force action is right now, right here at the African COP. I believe we can do this together. Thank you.
شكراً ليا ناموغيرا، ناشطة المناخ من أوغندا. ضيوف مصر الكرام، رحبوا معي بالسيد نائب رئيس الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية الأسبق آل جور الحاصل على جائزة نوبل للسلام في عام 2007 بالمناصفة مع اللجنة الحكومية الدولية لتغير المناخ.
Vice President of the United States, Mr. Al Gore.
Your Royal Highnesses, Your Majesties, heads of state, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it is a great honor to be able to play a part in this opening ceremony of the 27th Conference of the Parties. Mr. President, thank you. Mr. Secretary General, thank you for your leadership of the entire world. We are all here today because we continue to use the thin blue shell of atmosphere surrounding our planet as an open sewer. Today, as every day, we are spewing 162 million tons of man-made, heat-trapping, global warming pollution into the sky. It adds up and accumulates and lingers there. On average, each molecule lingers 100 years, and the accumulated amount now traps as much extra heat as would be released by 600,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every day on our planet. That's why we're seeing these disasters. And the pattern is very clear. It's getting steadily worse. We have a credibility problem, all of us. We're talking, and we're starting to act, but we're not doing enough. It is a choice to continue this pattern of destructive behavior. We have other choices. In my faith tradition, I learned a teaching that is common to all three of the Abrahamic religions, that God has set before humanity a choice between blessings and curses, between life and death. We face that choice today. We can continue the culture of death that surrounds our addiction to fossil fuels by digging up dead life forms from eons ago and burning them recklessly in ways that create more death, including 8.7 million people every year that die from the air pollution, principally caused by the burning of fossil fuels. The curses that we are continuing to choose are ever more apparent. We saw them on that amazingly powerful film, 1/3 of Pakistan underwater, 1,700 people killed. A heat wave in China that lasted 70 days with the heat above 40 degrees, 104 Fahrenheit, over a vast area of China. Stronger storms, bigger downpours, rain bombs, worse floods. Another million displaced in Nigeria 2 weeks ago. Another million in Chad a few days after that. The Nile Delta being salinated, just as Hannibal's fields were salted. We are causing the salting of the greatest agricultural area in Egypt, as well as in the Mekong Delta and elsewhere. Droughts are drying up the mighty Mississippi River in my country, the Tigris and the Euphrates in the cradle of civilization, the Po River in Italy, the Loire in France, the Rhine in Germany. All over the world, the greatest reservoirs in North America, Lake Mead and Lake Powell, are reaching what is called dead pool status. Starvation and famine in the Horn of Africa, devastation in Madagascar. And the areas of our world that are presently considered by doctors uninhabitable because of the combination of heat and humidity are relatively small today, but they are due to expand to the point where experts are predicting as many as 1 billion climate migrants crossing international borders in the balance of this century. Think of the millions that are crossing borders now and the xenophobia and authoritarian populism that is caused by a large surge of refugees. And then imagine, if you will, what 1 billion climate refugees would do. It would end the possibilities of self-governance. We have to act. We know that tragically, across the nations of Africa, these impacts are even worse, and in the Pacific Islands and elsewhere, and the poor suffer the most. The late Archbishop Desmond Tutu said climate change is the apartheid of our times. We don't have to choose curses. We can choose blessings, including the blessings of renewable energy. We are now in the early stages of a sustainability revolution that has the magnitude of the Industrial Revolution and the speed of the digital revolution. If we invest in it and stop subsidizing the culture of death, we can save ourselves. Dollar for dollar, each dollar spent in renewable energy creates 3 times as many jobs as dollars spent in fossil energy. And this sustainability revolution is massively deflationary at just the time when the world is trying to find new ways to battle inflation. The International Energy Agency has called solar energy the cheapest energy in the entire history of the world. And Africa can be the renewable energy superpower. Africa has 40% of the entire world's global potential for renewables. The potential for solar and wind in Africa is 400 times larger than their total fossil fuel reserves. And these are real possibilities. This is not pie in the sky. If you look at all of the new electricity generation installed worldwide last year, 90% of it was renewable because it is cheaper almost everywhere, and in 2 years it will be cheaper in 100% of the world. But it is not enough to simply increase our support for clean energy if we are simultaneously backtracking on our commitments against developing and financing fossil fuels. The world's leading scientists and energy experts have told us that any new fossil fuel development is incompatible with 1.5 degrees as the limit to the temperature increase. Mr. Secretary General, you said we are on a highway to climate hell. We need to take our foot off the gas. We need to obey the first law of holes. When you're in one, stop digging. We have to stop making this crisis worse. We must see the so-called dash for gas for what it really is. A dash down a bridge to nowhere, leaving the countries of the world facing climate chaos and billions in stranded assets, especially here in Africa. At a time of turbulence in the global energy markets, the wealthy nations of the world should not confuse the short term with the long term, and should not be fooled by the absolute need to backfill the shortage of fossil energy caused by the cruel and evil war launched by Russia in Ukraine as an excuse for locking in long-term commitments to even more dependence and addiction on fossil fuels. We have to move beyond the era of fossil fuel colonialism. And that's what it is. The dash for gas in Africa is a dash for gas to be sent to wealthy countries. We have to remove the barriers to the trillions needed for climate finance. And the scale of what is needed can only be provided by the private sector. I support governments paying money for loss and damage and adaptation, but let's be very clear that that's a matter of billions or tens of billions. We need $4.5 trillion per year to make this transition, and that can only come by unlocking access to private capital. In the United States and in Canada, if you look at all of the financing of renewable energy, 96% of it comes from the private market. If you look at Africa, much lower amounts overall, but what percentage of it comes from private markets? Not 96%, 14%. 86% comes from governments. Why is that? Because, for example, if you want to build a solar field in Nigeria, even though it's profitable, you have to pay interest rates that are 7 times higher than the interest rates paid by OECD countries. That is unjust. It is insane. That is what the World Bank and the multilateral development banks are supposed to address. We need to reconvene Bretton Woods and completely revamp and reform the World Bank system and make access to private capital available for developing countries. This is a moment for a global epiphany. It is not time for moral cowardice and reckless indifference to the future of humanity. If you want an example of reckless indifference, just recall the banker who said earlier this year in discussing the impacts of the climate crisis, "Who cares?" When he was fired, it reminded me of the famous writer who said that in the highest reaches of business and politics, a gaffe is often when someone accidentally tells the truth. The truth is that all of us have limitations and weaknesses and vulnerabilities, but as human beings, we also have the God-given ability to rise above those limitations. The greatest leader of my country, Abraham Lincoln, once said, "The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, we must think anew and act anew. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country." And that is the way we can save our world. More is needed, but we have the basis for hope. Just days ago, the people of Brazil chose to stop the destruction of the Amazon. Earlier this year, the people of Australia chose to start leading the renewable energy revolution. Earlier this year, the people of my country chose leaders who enacted at long last the biggest and most ambitious climate legislation in the history of the world. The world has passed and enacted the Kigali Amendment. We have the basis for hope. If we actually do reach true net zero, the scientists tell us temperatures will stop going up with a lag time of as little as 3 to 5 years. And if we stay at true net zero, half of all of the man-made CO2 will fall out of the atmosphere in as little as 25 to 30 years. But we have to choose blessings instead of curses. We have to choose life over death. If we are truly to make this COP the one that drives implementation of the pledges made in Glasgow, we must equip ourselves with every tool and resource to facilitate our path to true net zero and work together to drive impact and increase accountability. I want to applaud the Secretary General for making transparency around these net zero goals a priority. And I'm proud that 2 days from now, Climate Trace, a nonprofit coalition of artificial intelligence experts and data scientists and researchers and NGOs, will announce the first inventory of site-specific facility sources of greenhouse gas pollution, the most detailed inventory ever assembled that can be used to identify exactly where all this pollution is coming from. There is a path that we can make from here to a future with hope. As a final point, I started by saying that we have a credibility problem, but we also have the ability to address it. And if anyone doubts that we can summon the political will to do what is necessary and to save our future, always remember, that political will is itself a renewable resource. Thank you.
شكراً السيد نائب رئيس الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية الأسبق آل غور الحاصل على جائزة نوبل للسلام في عام 2007 بالمناصفة مع اللجنة الحكومية الدولية للتغير المناخي. والآن رحبوا معي بالسيدة فيرونيكا آيغينغ رئيسة قسم تقييم وتحليل نموذج نظام الأرض بجامعة بريمن.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, distinguished excellencies, recent climate change is unprecedented. We all know and feel this, but still, atmospheric levels of greenhouse gases reach new record highs every year. Atmospheric concentration of CO2 has risen to 416 parts per million today, being now 50% above the pre-industrial level. As a consequence, global warming has reached 1.1 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels in 2020. This is already very close to the Paris Agreement to limit global warming to near 1.5 degrees. The speed of this warming is rapid, and it is unprecedented in more than 2,000 years. Over the history of our planet, changes in global temperature were caused by natural events, like volcanic eruptions, the sun's activity, and orbital cycles. But the warming we observe since 1850 is not caused by natural events. It is caused by human activities emitting CO2 and other greenhouse gases, also causing widespread, rapid, and intensifying climate changes across the entire Earth system, which will increase with any additional further warming. In every region of the world, we are seeing out-of-control climate impacts, with extreme events becoming more frequent and more severe. Many of the recent extremes would have been highly unlikely to occur without human-induced climate change. Across sectors and regions, the most vulnerable people and ecosystems are disproportionately affected by these changes. The rise in extremes has led to some irreversible impacts as nature and humans are pushed beyond their ability to adapt. So what are our possible futures? These are the 5 CO2 emission scenarios assessed by the IPCC that depend on the level of climate change mitigation. 2 low scenarios in blue, where CO2 emissions immediately decline, 2 high scenarios in red, where they continue to rise, and an intermediate. And these are the corresponding temperature projections for each scenario. As you can see, only in the lowest emission scenario in the upper left, global warming projections stay close to 1.5 degrees by the end of the century, while in all others, projected warming is much higher. These climate projections provide a clear signal to COP27. To limit to 1.5 degrees, we need to cut CO2 emissions by around 45% by 2030. This is already in 8 years. And they must decline further to achieve net zero by 2050, followed by negative CO2 emissions throughout the rest of the century. Immediate, deep, and sustained reductions of methane and other greenhouse gases are also required.
Otherwise, limiting warming to 1.5 degrees will be beyond reach. But we are not on track. Not with policies that were implemented by December 2020, not with COP26 pledges, and not with policies currently in place that with no additional action are projected to lead to a global warming of 2.8 degrees. Distinguished Excellencies, this is falling far short of the Paris goals with no credible pathway to 1.5 degrees in place. Much stronger mitigation measures are needed to keep warming below 1.5 degrees, even for limiting it to 2 degrees. This demands immediate critical steps to shift societies, economies, and technologies towards net zero emissions across all sectors and all regions. It requires a systematic change, turning away from fossil fuel use, from exploitation of natural resources, and from unsustainable agriculture, forestry, and other land use. The next few years are critical. We have the know-how to take meaningful, more decisive climate actions, creating new economic opportunities for zero-carbon technology and conserving, protecting, and restoring ecosystems. Now is the time. Climate scientists around the whole world work together to provide you with this robust information on climate change and pathways for climate action. Comprehensive and long-term observation provide us with unprecedented and compelling information about the Earth system. Climate models provide us with robust information about future climate changes and impacts on natural and human systems. Based on this research, the IPCC 6 assessment report assessed the latest science on climate change. The cumulative scientific evidence is unequivocal. Climate change is a threat to human well-being and planetary health. Any further delay in collective global action on adaptation and mitigation will miss a brief and rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all. To avoid a climate catastrophe, we need urgent, large-scale transformation of our industrial energy and transport systems and our whole way of life. A shift from exploitation to cooperation with the environment towards nature-based solutions that help restore ecosystems and preserve biodiversity. Only then we can create a sustainable and climate-resilient world. The time for action is now, here at COP27. This is a global problem which requires action from all countries of the world, from all of you working together. Dear ladies and gentlemen, distinguished excellencies, your choices made in the coming 2 weeks matter for many generations to come. We, the whole world, count on you. Thank you.
شكراً للسيدة فيرونيكا آيرينغ رئيسة قسم تقييم وتحليل النموذج النظامي الأرضي بجامعة بريمن. والآن رحبوا معي بالسيدة ميا موتلي رئيسة وزراء دولة باربادوس.
Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, permit me to thank you, Your Excellency, President El-Sisi, for your wonderful hospitality and for all courtesies extended to us. And I want to congratulate Simon Steele, a son of the Caribbean, of whom we're very proud in his new role as Executive Director. I came here to say a few things, but the chorus that we've had from this stage has been clear. I don't need to repeat that we have the power of choice. Every speaker on this platform has done that. I don't need to repeat that this is the COP that needs action. All of us as a chorus have said that. I don't need to repeat the horror and the devastation wreaked upon this earth over the course of the last 12 months since we met in Glasgow, whether the apocalyptic floods in Pakistan, or the heat waves from Europe to China, or indeed in the last few days in my own region, the devastation caused in Belize by Tropical Storm Lisa, or the torrential floods a few days ago in St. Lucia. We don't need to repeat it, because a picture spoke 1,000 words earlier. But what we do need to do is to understand why we are not moving any further. 1.5 to stay alive cannot be that mantra. And I take no pride in being associated with having to repeat it over and over and over. We have the collective capacity to transform. We're in the country that built pyramids. We know what it is to remove slavery from our civilization. We know what it is to be able to find a vaccine within 2 years when a pandemic hits us. We know what it is to put a man on the moon, and now we put in rover on Mars. We know what it is. But the simple political will that is necessary, not just to come here and make promises, but to deliver on them and to make a definable difference in the lives of the people who we have a responsibility to serve, seems still not to be capable of being produced. I ask us how many more and how much more must happen. And I say so because there is no simplicity in it. We get it. I come from a small island state that has high ambition, but that is not able to deliver on that high ambition because the global industrial strategy that we have has fault lines in it. Our ability to access electric cars, or our ability to access batteries or photovoltaic panels, are constrained by those countries that have the dominant presence and can produce for themselves, but the global south remains at the mercy of the global north on these issues. But it isn't only in that. We heard Al Gore just now speak about the difference in the cost of capital to those of us in the global south. And I ask us, how many more people must speak before those of us who have the capacity to instruct our directors at the World Bank, is that called the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development only for the 20th century? At the IMF, which at least has been trying more than the World Bank? How many more countries must falter, particularly in a world that is now suffering the consequences of war and inflation, and countries therefore are unable to meet the challenges of finding the necessary resources to finance their way to net zero? This world looks still too much like it did when it was part of an imperialistic empire. The global north borrows between interest rates of between 1% to 4%. The global south of 14%. And then we wonder why the just energy partnerships are not working. Similarly, we ask ourselves if countries that want to finance their way to net zero and want to do the right thing can't get the critical supplies, will they not have to rely again on natural gas as that clean bridge? This is the bald reality. And we have come here to ask us to open our minds to different possibilities. We believe that we have a plan. We believe that there can be the establishment of a climate mitigation trust that unlocks $5 trillion of private sector savings if we can summon the will to use the SDRs, 500 billion of SDRs, special drawing rights, in a way that unlocks the private sector capital. We believe that that requires a change in the attitude of Congress. Because the agreement that establishes the International Monetary Fund requires 85% to change that agreement. And if the United States government has 17% of the quota, then it can't be done, Mr. Gore, without your Congress. Similarly, we accept that there was and must be a commitment to unlocking concessional funding for climate vulnerable countries. There is no way that developing countries who have been graduated can fight this battle without access to concessional funding. We heard it on this stage from the head of my old alma mater at LSU. We believe that it is critical that we address the issue of loss and damage. The talk must come to an end. And I'd like to salute Denmark and Belgium and Scotland for their own modest ways of trying to accept the precepts and principles of loss and damage as critical and as morally just. But for loss and damage to work, we believe that it can't only be an issue of asking state parties to do the right thing, although they must. But we believe that the non-state actors and the stakeholders, the oil and gas companies, and those who facilitate them need to be brought into a special convocation between now and COP28. How do companies make $200 billion in profits in the last 3 months and not expect to contribute at least 10 cents in every dollar of profit to a loss and damage fund? This is what our people expect. And I ask us, as we reflect on what a loss and damage fund can look like and who should access it, that we convene a special convocation that doesn't only involve state parties, but non-state actors, such as the same companies. We believe as well that the time has come for the introduction of natural disaster and pandemic clauses in our debt instruments. I have said that if Barbados is hit tomorrow, because we have natural disaster clauses, God forbid if we are hit tomorrow, we unlock 18% of GDP over the next 2 years, because what we do is effectively put a pause on all of our debt and put it at the end for 2 years and put it at the end, and we pay back that money at the end. But what we get is the flexibility in the first 2 years to address issues of damage and loss. And finally, we believe that the multilateral development banks have to reform. Yes, it is time for us to revisit Bretton Woods. Yes, it is time for us to remember that those countries who sit in this room today did not exist at the time that the Bretton Woods institutions were formed for the most part. And therefore we have not seen, we have not been heard sufficiently. And if we are therefore to rise to the occasion, to play our part to stop the tragic loss of life that we have seen on these screens, and the impact on livelihoods that we are feeling across our countries, then there needs to be a new deal with respect to the Bretton Woods institutions. And we need to ensure that they have a different view to their risk appetite, that we look at the SDRs, and that we look at other innovative ways to expand the lending that is available from billions to trillions. My friends, the time is running out on us. And yes, we have the power of choice. When asked what should he do when he became president of South Africa, should he pursue a path of vengeance or should he seek to build a state, Nelson Mandela chose to be able to build a state and to keep a country together. He chose blessings instead of curse, because he believed that it would make a defining difference. When given the choice of how to treat to post-war Europe, President Truman settled the Marshall Plan that made the definable difference to the countries that were responsible, yes, for the destruction of so much and for the loss of life of so many. But in spite of that, they chose to rise above it. I ask us today, what will our choice be? We have the power to act or the power to remain passive and do nothing. I pray that we will leave Egypt with a clear understanding that the things that are facing us today are all interconnected. I thank President El-Sisi for his comments that there needs to be peace, because countries like ours continue to suffer as a result of a war that we have no part of, and a war that we want to see come to an end. Our people on this earth deserve better, and what is more, our leaders know better. Because while many of us may not have been alive during the great wars, the consequences of those wars still live with us, and we have the capacity to choose differently. I ask the people of the world, and not just the leaders, therefore, to hold us accountable and to ask us to act in your name to save this earth and to save the people of this earth. The choice is ours. What will you do? What will you choose to save? Thank you.
شكراً للسيدة ميا موتلي رئيسة وزراء دولة بربيدوس. هناك العديد من الطرق للتعبير عن هذه الظاهرة التي تهدد العالم أجمع. البعض يسعى بفكرة أو مبادرة، والبعض الآخر يستخدم تطبيقاً عملياً للتغيير، وهناك أيضاً من يعبر عنه بالفن والإبداع.
She nourished them with her love. They were hungry for more. taking all that she's got. She taught them a lesson they didn't learn. Instead of loving her, they flood her with hurt. They shut their eyes and ears. They sit back and watch as the trees burn, coastlines flood, the land that bears, the seas rise, the ice melts. Now is the time to act. Together, we can heal Mother Earth. Together, for implementation.
ضيوف مصر الكرام، شكراً للمشاركة في الدورة 27 من قمة المناخ COP27 على أرض مصر من شرم الشيخ، بلد السلام، مدينة السلام الخضراء، المدينة التي تعبر عن جمال الطبيعة بكل أشكالها. كلنا أمل ويقين للوصول إلى تنفيذات جادة لأهداف المؤتمر خلال أيام انعقاده. كلنا معاً تحت شعار واحد، معاً للتنفيذ. Together for implementation. شكراً. Ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished guests, kindly exit the hall to prepare for the upcoming session scheduled in 1 hour. Thank you very much. Our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, kindly exit the hall to prepare for the upcoming session scheduled in 1 hour. Thank you. بالضبط انا مش عارفه الساعه كام اصلي دلوقتي يبقى 3:30
Thank you so much. بص من ورا.
Thanks.
Sorry.
واضحة ولا؟ Gyorsan, Barbara utána te is. Kész? Nem baj. Igen? اوكي.
يلا.
لا دوس على حلوة؟
عشان بتطلعوا في الصورة فاهم؟ واحدة تانية يلا.
اطلعي بره شوية بس.
مش أنا أتصور معاكي.
ثواني زي ما انت افتح فلاش بس. عشان عارفة من يلا واحد.
اللي انت شايفه.
فتحوا الإضاءة بعدين ونازلين مقارنة. العالم هيقع. صافي تليفونك حريني رنة اتصالات. ساعة
Good. You can do one side here as well. Not a speaker, but I can pretend maybe next year in Dubai. Oh, assalamu alaikum. Is it nice? We should do one in the here. حاضر.
لا خليك زي ما انت
انا عاوز حد يصورني هنا.
ايوه حاضر بس هقول له حاجه. باشمهندس ممكن المايكات تتفصل؟ باشمهندس حسام انزل
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تست مايك. بسم الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. تمام يا ريس؟ تمام يا هندسة؟ بسم الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله.
pay for two wireless microphone and screens.
Okay. C'est pas très grave. Si on arrive à avoir un test.
تست
اسمعوا الصوت بتاعنا.
Tu regardes devant si c'est bon. Et si je suis plus petit, ça va? Non. Mais il ne doit pas rebrancher encore le... Lena, can you help replug the light on it, please? Yann, tu peux faire pivoter un petit peu le...
الو الو
عايزين نوصل ده للإضاءة.
Hello. Yes.
عايزين نوصل ده.
عايز كابل باور.
الو
المفروض بقى حازم فيه شكله ينزلها مع بعض. في واحد واصل من هنا لهنا. والنبي عصام تحت. مش هو تحت؟ عايز في هنا كابل باور مكان البوديوم. يجيبوا لي هنا عشان انور البوديوم التاني. او انا هبعت له فيش انور البوديوم.
كده كده ما تجاوبش.
تمام؟ بقول له في فيشه نازله لك حطها في كهرباء. انا معاك. خمسه اللي هو واصل جوه وفي فيشه نازله له دلوقتي تحت الموضوع. الاكسنتر ده مش موجود تحت. ممكن نحط لك اي كابل. مش مشكله ماشي. طب الكابل اللي طالع هنا تاني زياده. طب يطلع خلاص. لا يطلع هنا.
انور لك.
انا متابع ده. في ار اكس ودي اكس. فين هم؟ تعالى.
لقيت كابل باور؟
انا جبتهم هنا. هاتوا عشان محمد عاوز. اهو. يا حسام ادي التي اكس. حسام ادي التي اكس. دور بقى يا عصام الكابل ده. بس تعالى كده. ايه؟ يا عصام. يا عصام. الفيشه دي هحطها في المشترك.
حطها.
طيب تمام. الكابلات بقى اللي ما بين الاثنين. محمد. تمام.
الو
طلع على ال
يقطع يفصل عليك.
المايكات اللي بره دي خالص، ها؟ 3 صفوف.
مش دلوقتي، هيرجعوا تاني. الو الو الو.
مفيش حد على الميكسر؟ في حد على الميكسر؟
حسام اتصلت بيه، يلا شغال. الو الو الو. بسم الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الو الو. تيست 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 تيست. بسم الله بسم الله. تيست تيست. الو الو الو. مين؟
محمد اللي بيوبريت.
ما هو حسام صلاح اللي هيوبريت بعد كده خلاص.
ماشي، اللي هيوبريت الديسكشن.
ايوه هو حسام صلاح. حسين هيمشي. الو الو. يا هندسة. الو 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 الو. ازاي؟ فيش ليفل. ثانية واحدة. طيب ثانية واحدة. شاويش جنبك؟ طب أنا هكلمه. ماشي.
الو.
عايز واحد هنا.
عاوز ايه بقى؟ عاوز ايه؟ وصل اول واحده واخر واحده بسويتشر واللي في النص على الام بي. اول واحده.
الو الو. Hello, 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 hello. Test mic, test mic. Hello.
check. اوديو تيست. اتصل لي بباسم. انت معاك باسم؟ قول له شغل لي البوديوم. تشيك.
مش عارف.
تشيك. علي ما فيش صوت يا علي. تشيك.
انا واقع عصام اهو.
تحت تعالى قول لي انت عاوز ايه.
الو.
دكتور.
تست.
تشيك. هندسه انت بتراجع معاه؟
ايوه براجع معاه. الو. زي الفل.
وانا لميت الكابلات من تحت ما شفتهاش باينه.
الله ينور. الو. الو. Test mic. Hello. 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 Okay. Hello. Test mic. Test mic. Hello. 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 Test mic. Hello. Hello. Test mic. Test mic. Hello. 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 Test mic. Test mic. 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 Hello.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Hello test check. Hello say test. انا عايز بقى حد يتكلم في الايه في القاعه عشان انا اسمع منه هنا. صح؟
حلو.
طب محمد موجود ولا اي حد؟
واحد منهم مش شغال، شغالين واحد بس.
Hello. Hello. Test mic. Test mic. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Test. Audio test. Test mic. Test mic. قول لي. ايه هاي؟ تمام؟ اوكي. ايه؟ كده راح خلاص تشيكو.
اديني. بسم الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تشيك اوديو تيست. بسم الله. تشيك.
تشيك. هلو تيست. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هلو تيست. تشيك.
يا ابني من هناك كده النقطة الثانية.
تشيك 1 2. تشيك. هلو تيست. تيست مايك. هيد تيبل. تيست مايك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هلو تيست. تشيك. تشيك. هلو تيست. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هلو تيست. تشيك. لا تيست. تشيك مايك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هلو تيست مايك. هلو تيست مايك. هلو هلو هلو. ايه الدنيا؟ سين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هلو. لا كده بس كده ايكو. سي. لا تيست. تشيك. هلو تيست. تشيك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هلو تيست. كده احسن يعني. هلو تيست. تشيك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هلو تيست. هلو تيست. تشيك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هلو تيست. تشيك. تشيك 1 2. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هلو تيست. هلو تيست. تشيك. خلاص يا حسين.